Hello again. I know that it has been a while since we have something on YouTube. For today's lesson, we are going to build a small RESTful APIs using Spring Boot. Let's just dig in. So first of all, we are going to navigate, as we learned in the previous lesson, we are going to navigate to SpringBoot.io, start.springboot.io, to create a new project using the tool that Spring has provided for us. So like usual, I'm going to choose Maven, Java, the most recent Spring Boot package or version. The group name is dev.yafatic. The artifact, which is our application name, I'm going to call it YouTube RESTful API. Let's change the package name, or let's just keep it YouTube RESTful API. And in the dependencies section, we are going to add the web, Spring Web, and that's it. You are ready to go. Let's generate the project, put it on desktop or in your preferred place. It's up to you. Now let's go to IntelliJ and open our project. In fact, open our Gradle. So let's navigate to desktop. Let's go to the application folder. Yeah, here it is. Build.gradle. Now open as project. Oh yeah, let's just wait for it. It's going to synchronize. It's going to download the packages, prepare our environment. After that, we can start to build our own RESTful API. So if we navigate to the build.gradle, we can check the packages. Actually, this is the minimal of Spring Boot application, but we should notice that there's here's the package that we add on start.springboot.io, which is the web framework of Spring Boot. It has all the dependencies that we need to build our own RESTful API. So let's go here. Let's create a package and let's call it controllers. Oops. In controllers, we can add our own controllers, which will have the RESTful controller. It's usually a Java class. This class will contain all our endpoints, all of our routes, and it will contain the logic for our application. So let's just create demo REST, for example. It's just a regular Java class, and we can use some annotations provided by Spring Boot to convert this class to a RESTful API. And it's simple. All you need to do is to call this interface, REST controller. That's it. And after this controller, we can just specify the link of the APIs, or let's just call it the link mapping. When we have a RESTful API, likely we will have something like your domain slash v1 slash APIs slash v1 slash, let's say, users, categories, authentication system, recommendation. Actually, this is the, let's say, the basic link, or the link that represent a group of routes. let's say that we have something like the following. For example, https domain.com/ or let's call it apis.domain/. So actually this is a root. The domain itself with the backward slash, it maps something. When you navigate to a website, when you hit the domain itself, actually it's mapping a route. So it's the same scenario in RESTful APIs, but there is like standards in the APIs, which makes your APIs something really unique, something really organized. Um, it's all about how you're going to design your APIs. You can of course just make them random without following any patterns or without following any standards, but that will make the stuff or the things harder for you. So there's a standard call that we can name our APIs like the following: API slash the version of the API 1, 2, 1.0, 1.1. It's up to the version or up to you how you're versioning or you are deploying or releasing your APIs. But let's just agree about something. The link of your APIs usually should look like the following. Now we can group our endpoints, and what I mean by endpoint is the destination of a resource. Like when you have a resource that doing something, maybe in databases, maybe to register a user, maybe to get an authentication token, maybe to query something from database, to query something from the API, to activate something. This thing, in fact, have a lot of HTTP requests. Let's say when you want to query something, you will likely use a GET request. But when you are going to save a resource in database, you are not going to use the GET HTTP request. No, you are going to use something to post your data, to submit your data. That data will be submitted from, let's say, the mobile application, from the web application. Who knows? Maybe it's a TV application like an Apple TV. Maybe it's an iOS application that submits or contacts with your APIs at the backend to save something or to do something in the backend. But most likely, when you are trying to save a resource in database, that will use something different than the GET mapping, because the GET mapping actually is used to just get something. For example, let's call this one. So we can use something like the following. As you can see, it's oh yeah. So this is like a GET mapping. Actually, we are using the GET request or the GET HTTP request. By the way, if you are not familiar with the HTTP request, just write down in the comments. Maybe you can do a session about the HTTP request, about the protocols, what they means, where we can use them. But for now, let's just keep it simple. When we define an API with a GET mapping with the following route, actually it's for getting data out of the database, out of the APIs, or out of something, your application logic, in fact. But if we are going to save a resource, then we will likely use something called a post mapping or a post request. For update the stuff, we are going to use the patch or put, and we can also use delete to delete a resource. Also we can use an update to update a resource, but in fact most of the people are using patch and put to save the resource or to update the resource in your system. So for now, let's say that we have a user system. User systems usually contains some logic, like when you have a web application or when you have a mobile application, you want to save users or you want to create users, or when someone using your service, you want to save their information. So you will have a logic in your application that takes the information of the user or of the client and save it to your database. When your user trying to log into your system, probably they are going to send you some credentials like username, password, and you are going to verify those stuff and you will send them back a request. Basically, your API is going to do something like this. When a user trying to hit his own profile page, either in the web application or in the web application, mobile application, they are going to request their data from your APIs. So let's agree for something that those logic behind your application or behind the operation, uh, or let's call it a group, behind the user group is actually the basic logic or the standard logic for your code or for your APIs to do the various stuff that we talked about: creating users, logging users, updating their profile, getting their information profile. So what do we mean by all of those ideas or thoughts? Actually, what we mean is to have a design for our APIs. When we write our own APIs, then we should have a clear idea how to design our APIs. So let's suppose that this RESTful API is going to be a user controller, which has the update, the create, the fetching data for our user. So when we define the link or the endpoint link, our API's link, it's going to be something like this. This is a standard API v1. The v1 is up to your version 1.1, version 2, version 2.1. It's up to your system release. After that, we will have likely the group name, like users, and we will have various API endpoints in here. And what I mean by endpoint is, let's say we are going to fetch the data of a user. This is going to fetch user data. Then our endpoint is the resource that the user is going to request or to ask for to get their information. It's going to be something like this: https apis.domain.com. Again, API, the version, users, get profile, for example. This is an endpoint. When we define something after the group, actually we are defining a resource or a logic in our application that's going to perform some tasks. Okay? Plus, it's going to take the username, for example. Or if you are using the IDs to fetch information, then you will likely use the user ID, for example. To post something or to save something in database, let's say that there is a user is going to register his information in the database. Then we will define an endpoint like the following, but let's define the HTTP request. It's going to be a post save user apis.yourdomain.com/API/v1, again the group, and create or register. So when you build a front end for your application, you will call this link, like you will have a JSON request or a JSON body, a JSON file like the following. We will have a JSON. Inside this JSON, we will define the following stuff like email. We will define the user email in here, or we will send the user email in here at email.com. The user will likely enter his password. Sometimes it's actually up to the system or the logic of the front end. Some of the people just sending the username and the password, and they will get the rest of the information later on when they have the user registered in database. Let's say there is a password and full name, for example. So username in here. Basically, this is a small RESTful JSON body. This JSON request actually contains some information that we have a logic to save this information in database to register the user. So when the user actually make a post request using the HTTP request to this endpoint, which is registered for this group, to this link, then we actually waiting for this body, or waiting for this information to come to this endpoint, and we will see this later on, but this actually was a small description about the endpoints. Again, let's just continue. Let's say that a user going to update his information, so update resource, then the same one, https apis.domain.com/ again API v1. It's like a standard, the group, and let's say update. Then we could send the information to this endpoint, which is update. It's actually expecting you to send a JSON body too with the new information, with the email information of the user or the unique identifier and database for the user. We will have something that show you this information in the future. So for now, we will create the mapping. It's called request mapping. In request mapping, we will define the API, v1, and the group. In our case, let's say this is the let's call this users controller to be more clear. Users controller. Now this user controller actually maps to this link, or maps to this information resource, and now we can go ahead and define our endpoints. We agreed to have a get request to the endpoint profile, so this is get profile, and we can define the I'm not going to use any, or let's just keep it simple. Let's use the string, and we will show dummy data. After that, we can extend this to show you more information. So we define a get request, as we said. This get request going to hit the get profile endpoint, and let's say get user info, and we will have the user ID in here, user ID at path variable string user ID. For RESTful API, just make sure that the name in here is actually matching the name in your method. We can just return welcome user as a small string. For the request mapping or the post mapping for saving the information, we will extend this tutorial to have something that saves the information, and we will have a database to save our own information, so we can just simulate the building of the RESTful APIs for like real life scenarios, not just dummy data. But for now, let's just keep it simple. Try to have a simple RESTful API using Spring Boot. So for now, let's go run our application. Our application should run on port 8080 now. This is default information. You can of course edit the information and application with properties. This is something that we are not going to talk about now, but let's just keep this in mind. For testing our APIs, there's various things actually. We can use a tool called http get, and we will call our endpoint. We are working on localhost port 8080. Again, API v1 users, and it is user profile slash, let's send number 1 as the ID of the user. Yeah, we get a request, we get a response. So our application is working. Let's just extend this and add the user ID, which is the information that we pass to the endpoint, plus user ID. Let's rerun our application. But for this time, I'm not going to use the terminal or this one. I'm going to use a RESTful client. There is a lot of RESTful clients in the market, but for most of the people actually are using Postman or Insomnia. It's up to you. Both of them working for the same thing. The terminal one is using the same thing. We can actually use curl. Curl will give us the same one. It's going to call the endpoint. We can actually perform post and patch request to the endpoints. But for now, let's just use the Spring Boot. And Spring Boot actually it has a user-friendly environment. You can just pass the link in here. Again, it's your link, API v1, the group, and the endpoint. This is our endpoint. We can send a request, and we can get a request back. So this is all of it for this time. If you have any questions, or if you would like to know anything else, just write down in the comments. If you have any information, if I made something wrong, I would love to hear from you. If you really like the content, just hit the subscribe button and activate the bell button too. And let's just keep this survive and continue to give this information to this great community. See you next time. Bye bye.